Welcome to Simplify to Scale, a show dedicated to helping you scale a high impact and high profit business that you love without all of the complexity and chaos that can keep you trapped in the day-to-day. I'm your host, Krista Grasso, and with decades of scaling experience, I know what actually works and what's just hype. So if you are done with all of the one-size-fits-all scaling advice and all of the overnight success promises, and instead you want proven practical strategies that will help you simplify operations, elevate your leadership, amplify profits, and scale sustainably, let's dive in and get started. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Simplify to Scale podcast. This week's episode is going to be a little bit different from our other episodes, which I'm quite excited about. And we're going to be talking about how to leverage what I call ecosystems thinking to solve business problems, how to get to the root cause of things, how to leverage this to build high-performing team practices. And what we're doing in today's episode is actually taking you behind the scenes of one of the live trainings that we deliver every single month inside our community called the Soul Collective. So this is our community for anyone who serves other businesses. So this can be the right-hand leader of the business, what we call a soul, a strategy and operations leader, but it's also for anyone who works as a coach or a consultant or an agency owner or agency owner team members, anyone who directly works with other businesses to help them grow, scale, and improve in any way, shape, or form. And we dive into things like leadership practices, strategic thinking, ecosystems thinking. So how you look at how all of the interrelated pieces of things come together and cause an effect where one action or one inaction in one area has downstream impacts in other parts of the business. And so this is a lot of what we do inside the Soul Collective. And every single month we meet, we deliver a live training, and then we open the floor for questions. And we give these really robust, incredible toolkits to help people go ahead and start to leverage these and implement these right away in their own businesses or in the businesses that they partner with and support. And so this month we talked about ecosystems thinking. And these sessions are actually led by Jessica, who you've met on the podcast before. She is my right-hand woman in my business. She is my CSOO, Chief Strategy and Operating Officer, which is what we certify and mentor people to become certified in. She is the lead mentor within that program, working one-on-one with the people in the program, while I tend to lead most of our sessions as a group. And so Jessica is an absolute rock star. She is an exceptional teacher, which you will hear as we go through this session. And so she was guiding people through ecosystems thinking. So I thought it would be a fun way to give you a little bit of insight into what that community is like. See if it's something that maybe is of interest to you or something you'd like to send your right-hand member or team through. And also, I am right now off the grid dealing with some personal things. So you're actually going to be hearing from my team a bit for the next couple episodes while I am working through some things, and they'll give you a little bit more insight into that. But that being said, this is a good intro to what we do in Soul Collective. It's a good intro to Jess and her brilliance. And also, you'll be hearing from Jess a little bit more coming up in future podcast episodes, not only in partnership with me, but also leading some solo episodes. So don't be surprised if you tune in over the next couple episodes and you hear a different voice. That is Jess. She is a key part of Lean Out Method and Strategic Ops Institute. She works really closely with our clients, and she is just a complete and total rock star and somebody I cannot imagine leading my business without being by my side. So I hope you enjoy Miss Jess as much as I do. And with that, let's dive into the behind the scenes of our Soul Collective from May.
Okay, hello everyone. Again, thank you all for being here. So excited to talk about today's topic, as it is something that impacts literally every single business leader that has any type of impact, especially depending on how you view and work within your organization or business. So it's one of those things to where I get excited talking about it because every client that I've worked with and even every team that I've been a part of, having ecosystem thinking is a game changer to the point where you can actually put yourself and your business in the position to scale in a way that actually works well because you're getting to the nitty gritty and the root problem that might be plaguing your progress. And so we're going to just dive into some things, and let me just kind of give you an overview of today's workshop. So we're going to do it a little different today because it's really going to be application heavy. We're going to talk about how to actually implement it. So, we're not word heavy on the slides today, but your toolkit is going to come in handy because I gave you all of the goodies, templates, how to use it, when to use it, examples, and everything. So, I'm going to go through the toolkit in addition to just kind of having some support from the slides, but the toolkit is what's going to be extremely helpful for you. So please make sure you download that because you don't want to miss out on all of the goodies that are in there. So today we're going to just kind of dive into um, why ecosystem thinking matters for strategic leaders and having a real conversation about it instead of it being something that's just a nice idea, but an actual real life application and how to why fixing the symptoms doesn't actually get you to the root of the problem. And then we're also going to just make sure that you have access to the tools and have everything that you need in order to be great and actually apply everything. All right. So what is ecosystem thinking? Okay, we kind of dived into it just a little bit, but I'm going to go a little bit deeper. All right, and so ecosystem thinking is actually the practice of looking into the business as a whole, as a connected system versus it just being a series of just like one off problems. And so, one of the examples that I like to use just in general about just a general ecosystem is just like think about Apple products. And so even though you're not necessarily tied to your iPhone and you could probably switch your phone, the entire ecosystem and how certain things work together is kind of what makes it something that collectively might make you stick with an iPhone. And so let's just say an example of me. I'm not Apple heavy or just like I'm not married to Apple, but because of my ecosystem with it being my iPad, my MacBook, and whatever else, those things talking to each other make it an entire ecosystem for me. So changing one component would make a difference because collectively it's an entire system. And so when we look at our business like it's an actual system of these interconnected pieces and it not just being a one-off situation, it really contributes to the overall cohesiveness that you experience. And so whenever we dive into that, we know that those short-term fixes don't typically solve the underlying issues. And so it's really critical to make sure that as the strategic ops leader in your business, it's like your superpower is to know that you're not just solving problems, but you're improving the entire way that the business runs. And so let's talk about like when to think about using ecosystem thinking. When you realize that you're solving the same problem over and over again, you might need to take a deeper dive. And so, an example of that in real life business is um, let's just say you are consistently having issues with a particular outcome from your team member. And if you see that it's a recurring issue, then that's something that might need to be addressed in a different way. Because if you've done the same thing and you're still getting the same outcome, it's time to shift the way that you might approach that situation. That idea of something keeps breaking even when it's been fixed, that's something to really think through because it's really like putting a band-aid on it. It doesn't exactly resolve the issue itself. Teams are unclear, disconnected, etc. So there are ways to identify when you need to use ecosystems thinking. Everything doesn't have to be so in depth to the point to where you're like, oh, is this an ecosystems thinking problem because one thing came up? No, that's not the case. But at the same time, the way you can actually evaluate it is, this is a recurring issue. This is a recurring symptom. An example, just from a personal level, Krista knows that this has been my real life struggle over the last few months. And I'm happy to say we haven't even had an update yet, Krista, but I've been having these symptoms of, okay, my throat's hurting or I'm feeling under the weather and I just can't figure out what it is. It's been a recurring issue. I had that issue in December. I had it again in February and I had it again in April. So to me, this is a bigger issue. So ecosystems thinking, I need to get to the root of the problem. So I had a specialized doctor's appointment, went and got everything assessed, and then I got a referral to an allergist. now I understand what might be causing these symptoms to occur, which would be my ongoing problems or things that I need to fix. And so, with that, it's getting to the root of the problem is what's going to help me no longer have these recurring issues. And so, that's really the concept behind ecosystems thinking. Let's clearly you can apply it to other aspects of your life and not just business, as I did, but at the same time, just wanting you to really kind of understand and bring it all together for you. Okay, so we're going to dive into how to actually practice it. So, there are two ways that we're going to dive into today. And we're going to first tap into the five whys. And so the five whys is literally asking why for to be able to navigate through the resolving of an actual issue to get to the root. And so if we're going to use this standing example, but there's an example of, and we're going to let's just use it to where client projects are consistently missing a deadline. Okay, that's going to be your problem. So you've stated your problem and you need to make sure that you're very clear about what it is. And one thing that I would always advise against is making it too convoluted and having it be a compound problem because then that would make it challenging. So simplify your statement and really think about what your actual problem might be. And so it's if client projects are consistently missing deadlines, okay, the first thing you're going to do is ask yourself, why is this happening? Okay. And then you might have an example of that could easily be we are late getting deliverables back to the client. Why are we late getting deliverables back to the client? We're late getting responses from the client in order to meet a particular deadline. Okay. Why is that happening? Because we weren't clear in communicating the timeline to the client on which we needed this to be returned or communicated. We weren't clear up front. And then you ask yourself why one more time. And then you ask, okay, why is that? Maybe that narrows it down to we didn't have a clear onboarding process whenever we onboarded this particular client. And so it seems tedious to literally ask yourself, why? But the reality is when you take your time, especially with your team, to dive into the why behind what's taking place, you challenge yourself to think on a deeper level. And each time you take that layer off, you start to get to the root of what is actually taking place. And once you, in a sense, solve or kind of get to the nucleus of it, you're able to then prevent that from being a recurring issue and a recurring problem because you've gotten to it at the root versus just treating the symptom. So just as you could potentially just say, okay, well, we're just going to keep being late, or I'm going to try to on the surface level, maybe level 2 or 3. But then if you get down to the root, then it becomes your new normal. And then as you're scaling in a way that actually works for you and your entire organization. You're scaling something that's more positive than scaling negative behaviors. And so you really want to make sure that you make that connection. So once you identify the why, you want to then create a plan around that. And I actually, and I even reference this in your toolkit, really tie in the lean strategic planning system so that you are able to then make sure that you're planning to do that accordingly so you don't derail your plan. And just for those that are involved in Soul Collective, but you may not be in one of our certifications or programs, the lean strategic planning system inside of our CSOO program is so phenomenal to the point where that helps you get to the root of all of that. So, not going to dive too deep into that, but I did want to at least make that reference so that you all can make that connection. Okay, before I continue on into the next diagram, I wanted to ask you, Krista, just in case, did you have any thoughts or anything that you wanted to add to that?
Only thing I wanted to add is I loved your example because I can't tell you how many times I've gone in to work with clients, and what I hear back is, "Well, we're late all the time, but it's just because the clients don't get us things, so it's not really our fault." And people will just kind of move on from it and say, "Well, if the clients just sent us the things when they needed to, we would have hit these deadlines." And so they think we're trying to solve for a late client problem, or they just are kind of dismissing the problem and thinking they should focus attention somewhere else because, clients are just late at sending things to us, and not digging deeper and realizing that the problem actually originated from them. Yes, it's a late client problem, but you didn't really give that client the opportunity to be on time by being more clear. And so I think sometimes 5 whys can be so valuable when you walk into any client engagement because people frequently think they understand what the root cause is, and it's usually not the real root cause. You have to keep digging to get to the heart of it.
Exactly. And I love that you say that because it is easy to make something the fault of the other party in a sense. And it's not that it's intentional, it's just that's what it presents as at face value. And so that's what you think. And so it is really important to take that time to evaluate your own processes and the way that you're doing things and the way you're communicating, because that allows you to one, hold yourself accountable, and then that also identifies areas of improvement, but then also like it encourages you to go into a deeper level. So thank you for saying that part, Krista. All right, so we are going to dive into the fishbone diagram, also known, and I struggle with the pronunciation, so I'm gonna try. Ishikawa? Okay, yay. Okay, so it's funny. I was like, sound it out, Jessica. Okay, all right. Also known as the cause and effect diagram. And this is best practice after you've kind of gone through the 5 whys because you've already identified what your issue or your undesired outcome might be. So, if you position this and if you're going to do both activities, then I would definitely recommend doing the 5 whys first and then positioning the fishbone diagram second. And if you are not going to do the 5 whys, which is fine, I recommend it, but if you don't, then just make sure that you're very clear on identifying what your problem is so that you are able to have a clear breakdown. Um, and one of the things that I really like about the fishbone diagram is because it helps you identify, organize, and visualize the root cause in a different way, and it allows you to look at it through a lens of multiple categories because there are different ways and different categories that might impact your problem. So, if you have, and we're going to actually go through an example as well, but if you have a particular issue with the team member or whatever the case is, there could be multiple categories and components. Yes, so diving into that. So basically what is it? Is the diagram. It's the visual of the it's a visual approach to problem solving. And so first you're going to identify the problem after you've done your 5 whys because you've done your due diligence, and then you are going to brainstorm causes. And what I think is a beautiful opportunity, especially as we were last month talking about high performing team, this is a really good opportunity for you to collectively talk with your team. And one thing that I think is beautiful first before you even start categorizing things is actually just have a brain dump, whether you do it on Miro, have it on sticky notes or whatever, just get everything out of your head. And the more that you're not boxed in, the more I think the ideas just flow. So remember, when you're in a brainstorming state, there's nothing that is off limits. So don't discourage your team from being honest about what it is that they feel as long as it's appropriate if you set those guidelines in that sense. But allow people to really just be free in what they think their causes are to the actual undesired outcome or whatever the problem might be. When you do that, that allows us as leaders to be able to think outside of the box because often our team members will bring up things that we may not think about, and when that actually takes place is we get to think outside of ourselves and we get to also see things through the lens of our team members. So definitely encourage this brainstorming activity collectively. Um, that way you are able to get a real scope and view of what's taking place. Then you want to actually analyze relationships and how they might be connected to a particular category. So in this example, we have people, process, tools and technology, strategy and goals, communication, environment, and external forces. Excuse me, factors. And so this is relevant to, you know, a lot of business models, et cetera. But know that you're not limited or tied to these. You're able to modify these in ways that work. And so after you've brainstormed a bit, take those sticky notes, even if they're on Miro, take them and start to place them in areas that it matches that category. And so just think through, and I challenge you to come up, and hopefully, if you have some areas that may not be as fleshed out, you'll start to see where some of the gaps are. So maybe it's not a process problem, but maybe you have six things under communication. You're starting to realize which category impacts that problem a little bit more. But I also would want you to make sure that you all have collectively thought through if there are any gaps present for the, let's just say, if process was looking a little skimpy, just take a minute to make sure that are there any gaps in our processes that we could contribute that could be a contributing factor to this problem. So really taking what you have, seeing where you have the most, being happy that you may not have a lot in other areas, but taking the time to see if there anything that you can find as a gap. Krista, do you have anything before we dive into the example?
One thing that I'll say, and I think Jess's example will help make it really real for everyone, but I have facilitated, I can't even tell you, probably over 100 workshops where I've done this with teams. And inevitably, people always will be kind of, you almost get a little bit of the eye roll in the beginning. It's like, we already know what the problem is. Why do we have to go through this activity? And people will start off immediately being like, it's just this team's problem or this people problem or it's this tool problem. And forcing them to go through this as much as they can kinda grunt and groan in the beginning of it, in the end, they usually walk away with so much more clarity on what the actual causes are in getting to the root cause, and they have such a different level of ownership over it because of the conversations and the discussions that happen. And so if you're looking at this and like, "That feels kinda heavy, I don't know that I wanna do this with my team," it is definitely best done in a room in person if you can. A Miro board or something like that where you can talk it out would be another thing. I would do it live, not asynchronous, although I love Jess's kind of brainstorm and come in with ideas, that can be done in advance. But it's that sort of stuff where have people go through something similar to this if you don't use this exactly, because it's about breaking down the assumption about what the problem is and forcing people to really think it through, but also it's the conversation among people that is where the real value is, because even if they were right when they walked in and knowing exactly what it is, not everybody might have that same understanding or might have the same depth of understanding where the conversation takes it to a much deeper level, where sometimes you unearth things that you didn't even realize going in. So it will be one of those ones, like whenever I bust out the flip chart with the the fishbone, people are like, not the fishbone. Because it just you look at it and you're like, "Do I really have to fill that? We already know what the answer is, come on." And I've yet to ever have a team walk out without feeling like it was a super valuable activity and having learned something really good. But this is one of the ones for whatever reason, people just grumble from the beginning. So fair warning if you get that reaction from people.
Yes. All right. So if we are going to look at an actual example of the one that I mentioned earlier. So client projects are consistently missing deadlines, and so we're going to pretend that we have already completed our brainstorming session. And there was one other component that I thought about as Krista was actually speaking, and this is also for those that are in that phase of potentially building a team or you're building the trust within your team, whatever the case might be. Just as she mentioned, like teams might not be too thrilled about actually diving into this exercise or activity. And if that's the case, maybe even think about giving your team an opportunity to anonymously be able to contribute because maybe they want to be make a suggestion without feeling judged overall collectively or not, and giving them the opportunity to actually be able to say things that are a little less comfortable. And then that's how you start to cultivate that environment with your team because at least you start to have the conversation even if it was submitted in an anonymous way, as long as it's within the appropriate guidelines. The reality is that's what starts to break down those barriers and build trust because you start to have those real conversations. And as a leader, I also, and I'm giving y'all all kind of challenges. I challenge you to make sure that you are not reactive to the things that you actually see, but you're responding in a way that allows your team to feel comfortable and open so you can have those transparent conversations to actually solve the root of the problem versus just what's on the surface level. And so after you've narrowed that scope a bit and you've categorized your sticky notes, you've put them in the appropriate place, you want to really look and ask, okay, where Are where are the problems, or excuse me, the causes most concentrated? Are there overlaps or patterns? And then what seems to be the root category of the problem? So I know for some it might be processes, because if you're in a state of you're growing faster than you may have the bandwidth for, you're likely to have some issues in processes as well as communication and potentially people, because you're having so much change at such a fast rate, you might not be able to keep up with everything. And if that's the case, you really want to start to narrow the scope, have an idea of where your overlap is, and then that will help guide you what areas you might need to investigate a little more deeply, and then you get to use that as informed data so that you can know where to focus your solutions. And then you have to determine, what does a solution look like? What is the desired outcome? And so once you have that clarity, then you can start to create your plan, which we've mentioned, and actually work alongside with your current plan and integrate that into whatever your monthly, quarterly, or annual plan might be. You want to make sure that you also are thinking about capacity at the time that you're doing that, because you might have a problem that you may not be able to fix super quickly. And if that's the case, that's fine. But let's think about a way you can do it in a way that aligns with your team's capacity. And you're very intentional about also having check ins with that. So I would recommend you actually doing that and creating your monthly plan, quarterly plan, and when you meet on your weekly cadence, if you do, then just having like a super quick check in, because that, even if it's 5 minutes, you're having it be a part of the conversation, but it doesn't have to be what's taking up the majority of the time. So it's just, what are we doing to move the needle in solving this actual problem? Because once you do that on the root level, it allows you to make the progress that you need. You retain clients. If we're using this example, you retain clients. You also create a better team cohesiveness because you solved a problem collectively, and you've overall gotten your business in an area, at least one area, better for as you scale and progress. So the good thing is that if we already know that if what you scale is you're amplifying what already exists, you're amplifying something good versus something that can negatively impact your business. So that is what I have. I want to know if you all have any questions, any real life examples, whatever the case may be, because I wanted to make sure that I gave you all enough time to be able to dive into um, any components that are actually important to you so that you can apply it today moving forward.
All right, Jess. Well, questions are coming in. I'll jump into with a quick ad here as to when you would use this. I'd love to hear from your perspective when you would recommend that businesses or teams or CSOs or souls would use this.
Just one of the obvious of when to use this would be when you are noticing that you're having recurring issues. But then I would also look at it as, you feel like you're in a stagnant place as well. So we feel like we're stagnant, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a negative, but you're not moving in a direction that feels like it's productive, or people aren't, even if it's the people aren't growing, whatever the case is. So even if you're stagnant and you're wanting to level up, then I would definitely even evaluate that, because that could be your undesired outcome. That could be your undesired, your issue. And so it doesn't necessarily have to be framed in a negative way, but it's like, we want to do this. Okay, great. What is keeping us from doing that? What's keeping us from doing that? So going through the 5 whys, I think that would be another opportunity to do it. And I would also, even just from a reverse psychology standpoint, is actually identify something that's actually working really well, and then identifying why it's working well, digging deeper into the 5 whys, and then you have a model for how to work on the areas that aren't doing as well also. And then making sure that if those components are working well, making sure you documented that process as in depthly as you can, because it gives you the opportunity to have everything documented, so it's easier to duplicate that success in other areas of your business.
I love that. I think that makes so much sense. And the other thing that I would throw out when you were going through the example, the one that I thought of, I think you all know right now the kind of buying cycles have shifted quite a bit. The way people are making investment decisions has shifted, and this has impacted a lot of businesses. A lot of businesses are kind of scrambling a little bit and saying, what do I do? Like, how do I do this?" Instead of teams being in panic mode and in, "Oh my God, sky is falling. What are we going to do?" mode, this all of a sudden centers everybody around, "Let's get to the bottom of this and let's come up with a solution of what we can do here." Like, yes, now we understand what the problem is. The market has shifted. Buying cycles are elongated. It's impacting our particular business. We know this. It's an environment external factor kind of area where you might have some some things to brainstorm on there, right? But now all of a sudden it gets everybody together to try to solve that. It's not just even getting to the root cause, but it's more looking at it from that creative, what are we going to do about it place versus that reactive, oh no, things are terrible place. And so I think from the what Jess was sharing earlier about high performing teams, it really kind of rallies everyone around understanding something and also taking ownership of something, which is great.
What do you do if you stall on idea for root causes? Let's see, hopefully you would have applied the 5 why. So if you jump right into the fishbone and you skip the 5 whys, I would challenge you to actually go through the 5 whys if you skip that part. And if you didn't, then even if you have like a business bestie or something like that, you can even say, "Hey, this is what I'm thinking through. Will you brainstorm with me on potential ideas?" And then that's where you can also rely on your handy dandy friend ChatGPT to be able to give ideas and honestly say, "I'm drawing a blank on being able to think of root cause or the root problem or whatever, and I want to know what could be contributing factors in these categories." If you're very specific, it can start to give you that. So if you do stall, that would be a good opportunity, in my opinion, to talk about using AI.
If you do this in a team environment, what I find when a team stalls is one of two things. A, they kind of are hitting that tough point where when they push through is where the real answers are gonna be, and they don't wanna keep going, so they will frequently say, "We don't have the answers, we don't have the right people in the room, we need to go ask so and so, we need to," and they'll try to push it because they don't wanna face kinda what's coming, and it's not always done consciously, but a lot of times you'll hit that wall. But the other time on the inverse, what I find is sometimes you have too few people doing it. If you're trying to do this yourself in a business, you're not gonna have as much knowledge to be able to do it. You can make an expert judgment on what you think is happening, but you don't know the ins and outs, so you need the right people contributing. And so it's like you need the right people there to have the conversation, but if you do have the right people there to have the conversation, you can't let the wall go up where people put a stop and say, "Ah, nope, need somebody else. Can't do this." And it's because they've hit the uncomfortable part where they know that they're probably gonna have to change or it's gonna shine a light on something that maybe they should have been doing differently or better. And so you'll sometimes get a stall that's used as a either conscious or unconscious tactic because people don't wanna actually share the root cause or see the root cause. Whereas other times it's you don't have the right people in the conversation, and it's a sign that maybe you need to be pulling in a more extended team where people who have the expertise that just simply aren't available.
Right. And one of the things that I would even add to that as well is maybe having prompting questions, just like in the example that's up right now, is having guiding questions that can help kind of trigger that thought for them to be able to engage. So it may not always be just easy for them to just give you a flood of ideas and contributing factors. And if that's the case, maybe even having prepped in advance some questions that can help guide the conversation a little bit to encourage that dialogue to be able to come through. We got one more. I've been doing team interviews and I was thinking about filling out the diagram for my interview transcripts to give the founder as a deliverable. Would it be better to do the exercise with the team live? I would definitely recommend doing it with the team live. What I would do is frame it, at least have somewhat of a framework or a skeleton kind of present so that it kind of creates the structure in a sense on the back end, especially if you're going to talk to the founder about it, because you're going to need to be able to explain the process and then what the desired outcome will be and what is going to what is going to be the benefit of actually going through this process. So you'd actually want to talk to the founder, in my opinion, about setting everything up on the back end. And then as you conduct it with the team, I think that'll help get the team's input and buy-in as well as their contributing information. But you've already set the tone as well for the founder because there might be some factors or characteristics of the founder's behaviors that you might want to just encourage or let them know like we really want to hear from the team or this is an opportunity for everyone to be able to be involved because I've noticed some engagement or the lack thereof, or whatever the case is. I would definitely be gentle and positive about it, but at the same time, letting the founder know to a degree of what is to come and what takes place, I think will help the entire exercise be more successful with the team. But I definitely would want to do the exercise with the team because I think you get a better scope of what the actual contributing factors are when you include more than just the founder.
Yeah, and to add to that too, if you think about it, without having the context for what you're doing, if you've been doing interviews with the team, what I'm going to assume is you're unearthing some issues within the business. And so those issues within the business, you might or might not actually have the root cause yet. And you probably can't, unless you've done this as a full team activity with high confidence, say you fully understand the root cause. You probably have some really good expert ideas of what the root cause is, but you might not have been able to dig in enough to know the details of it. But what you probably do have a good idea of is what the problems are or what the issues are. And so the, yellow circle over to the right in Jess's example, if you can even get the team to align on what the top 3 current problems and issues are, and you get the founder to agree, that in and of itself is hugely valuable. And then from there, if you have this tool that you can leverage with the team, to really get to the bottom of it and understand the root cause. Or again, if you have pretty high confidence based on your conversations and your expert judgment what it is, you can even say to the founder, I have a pretty good idea that this is what's going on here, but what I think would be super valuable is if we actually bring the team together and we do this around these top 3 issues or this top 1 issue, whatever it makes sense for from a quantity perspective, then it gets everybody on the same page. And again, it's more of that positive spin on it where you're pulling them in not to vent about all the things that are wrong. You've already identified the problem. You're bringing them in to unearth kind of what you need to do to be able to improve upon it. And so I think that it could be a win-win all the way around where the outputs of your interviews could help inform what the problems are and the teams could help participate in the solutions around those problems for the founder.
Right. Love that. I think I'm just itching and so excited about what we're going to actually talk about next month. So I think that's what I'm excited to actually get to. So today we've had this whole conversation about ecosystems thinking and how we're getting to the root of the actual issues and we're navigating and tackling those things. And so as we are solving those problems, the reality is like there's work that has to be connected to those. But the good thing is that those manual tasks that are repetitive in nature or whatever the case is, or even just like as Saban mentioned earlier, it's like, can we use ChatGPT for aspects of this? Yes, you can. And the good thing is that next Soul Collective, we are going to, or workshop, we're going to actually talk about AI enabled ops and building systems that move from manual to momentum. And so it's how can we integrate AI into this ecosystems thinking and making it connect and being able to use what we've applied from this ecosystems workshop this month and how we can actually make it work to our advantage using AI. And so we're going to talk about using appropriate prompts, how different AI tools can be beneficial and how to actually integrate them. And so that's going to be something that I'm really excited about. It'll be another good opportunity for you to have your whatever method or tool that you kind of like. Just play around with some things this month as you are kind of navigating through May and see which ones you might be interested in. And then we'll dive in a bit deeper on AI and how that integrates into our ecosystems thinking in the month of June. So thank you all so much for being here. Krista, thank you for your input. It's always extremely helpful, and I love hearing what you have to say as well. And unless you have anything else to add, I guess we can wrap up.
Thank you, everyone. Happy May. See you in June. So that was this month's Soul Collective, some excerpts from that. I hope you got a lot of value from it. And if this sounds like something that you'd like to be a part of, in our next session, we're going to be talking about AI. We talk about AI really regularly within the program. We give some great prompts and some great toolkits. We share how we're leveraging it and what we're doing. But as I mentioned at the beginning, this is also all about strategic thinking. This is about helping businesses scale. This is about helping you or helping your team step up into more of a leadership role or more of that executive level leadership role. And it's a really fantastic community where everyone who's in our current certification programs are a part of that community. And we are just now opening that up to people outside of our certifications. So would love to have you come in and join us. We do these live workshops every single month. We also have some really fantastic things that we do on an ongoing basis within the community, but something we're getting ready to kick off and add starting in Q3 that I'm really excited about is if you remember my Propel program from a ways back. This is something we've done for several years now. It's had some different names and been part of different programs, but this is where we come together as a collective and do our 90-day planning every single quarter. This is where we come together as a collective and co-work on our monthly planning. And when we approach monthly planning, we look at it as the integration of not just the behind the scenes projects in the business, but also the marketing campaigns and the things that you're doing to grow the business. So we holistically look at all of the facets of the business. And so we're going to be doing this together. So every single month, we're going to be doing planning. Every single quarter, we're going to be developing that 90-day plan. And then as a special bonus, I'm actually going to be hosting a live virtual retreat that is going to be doing annual planning. And so anyone who joins us for Q3 is going to automatically get access to that, whereas that will be a separate paid activity beyond that point in time. So if this sounds like something of interest to you, I invite you to check it out. Head to strategicopsinstitute.com/collective. You will find all of the details, all of the incredible bonuses that we have right now. And I'd love to have you join us and virtually see you in our next workshop coming up in June. But that being said, I hope you got a lot of value out of this episode. I hope you enjoyed getting to know Jessica a little bit better. And stay tuned because you're going to hear her on the upcoming episodes a lot more as well, especially as I'm off the grid for these next couple weeks. Have a fantastic week. I will be back with you soon, and we will be back with you next week. Thanks so much for tuning in to this week's episode of Simplify to Scale. If you'd like to take things further, I invite you to join me for my Scale Smarter, Not Harder interactive workshop. Head to strategicopsinstitute.com/scale smarter to get registered. Not only will we dive into what might be keeping you trapped in the day-to-day, but you'll have the opportunity to ask me your questions live. If you got value out of today's episode, I'd love if you'd take a moment and rate and review the show so more businesses can learn to scale more simply and sustainably. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode, and I'll see you again next week.